Good morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. I'm loving my life. Who could complain on a day like today? Not me. No way. I can't do it. I got minor complaints, not major complaints. Nothing that needs to be aired with you folks. I'm here for just the fun and good news this morning. Let me see, though. I got to make sure I'm getting comments from all of our stations, and I see the Rumble authenticator has kicked me out, as it often does, but I will have my vengeance as I log in. There we go. It says it started 2 minutes ago, as I'd hoped. I still have not figured out the system to get all of your beautiful comments coming up on the screen, so we're just going to have to keep reading them for now. Good morning. The sun and Bitcoin are both running. Going to be a great week indeed, Seaberger. I'm glad you've got some sun there. I've got some gray skies here on a Monday morning in Barbados, but it should clear up later. And even if it's gray for the day, I don't mind too much. Welcome back, Bitcoiners, and you too, Nolan. Thank you, Lance2002. Jack2K says, good morning, Nolan and Great Awakening crew. Happy Monday. Here's a new Groundhog Day 2026 video. Pretty cool, Jack2K. I didn't know they had Chicago Groundhog Day stuff, but I guess, well, it's still pretty far as I understand. But Woodstock Willie. There you go. Woodstock Willie. Good morning, indeed, Hassan. Good morning, Wake Up Crew from Citadel Daniel. My dad and I washed it together, says Jack2K. Well done. Great. Noah Simsa says, good morning, folks. Happy Monday. CBN. Good morning, Awakeners. I just saw a flash on my screen. Let me make sure I'm coming through loud and clear. I thought I did all the right things before I went live today. I believe the Wi-Fi is off. I believe I rebooted to make sure I have all the memory I can use. Hopefully it all works. Good morning, crew, and God bless indeed. Good morning, gang. Anyone going to Bitcoin conference in Vegas this April? Seaberger asks. I will likely be there. Citadel Daniel says, skipping Vegas this year, heading to Prague, probably a good choice. No authorization for you. Count fresh out. Indeed. Let's go. Good morning, wake up, gang. Chatelet, escape the matrix. Hyper Bitcoinization is the town near you. LFG, indeed. Yeah, I'd say the overall feeling around Bitcoin Las Vegas is quite mixed this year. I think we're going to not have as large of a presence in terms of Roxham. I'm more or less guaranteed to be there, but I'm not sure how many people are actually going to be there. I know this year it's actually competitive against the Token 2049 event in Asia, so I doubt we're going to get many foreigners coming in for Bitcoin Las Vegas, which is fine. We love the American iteration of Bitcoin, and so it should be pretty Americana. So I guess we'll know what it's like based on who the administration sends, if they send anyone, and I think that has a big role in how much energy that event is going to have. I think it'll be good. I don't think it'll be the top watermark of the event, but it'll be worth me going. And I will likely be doing a little side event, and I would invite all of you who are planning on coming to be there. I'm not sure where yet. I'm trying to get a little book tour organized for the spring and early summer, which I hope to culminate in Calgary, Alberta, during the Bitcoin Rodeo. You know, that's produced by my Friday afternoon co-host for the Breakup Canada, also known as the All Out podcast. That would be Dave Bradley. He is the founder of that event. It's a great event, and I suspect it's going to be heavily aligned with Alberta separation and Alberta sovereignty by the time June comes around. So I've written a book a lot about the future of Canada, as well as how it died and how you can survive. Still playing around with a few titles, but it's a pretty fun book, and I will be at Bitcoin Rodeo at the end of June to talk about it, but I hope to do a bit of a book tour beforehand that would see me go to a few American cities in the spring and just let everyone know what the hell happened to Canada, why it's dying, where it's headed, and how you can profit, not just survive the Canadian apocalypse, but indeed make a little money. We all want to make a little money, right? All this talk of Rothschilds profiting off of the decay of certain empires got me thinking. I've had some ideas, and I'll be sharing all of those ideas with you folks over the next few months. So you've already heard bits and pieces and snippets of this whole story, but I shall have it all in an entertaining package that you can enjoy and consume and hopefully share. We like the sharing. So there you go. We'll get into that in a moment. But first, let's just acknowledge that that is operational Sunrise Tech. We're doing great. We got the sun. We're having fun, right? And Bitcoin's running. We're down to 68,000 US trash tokens, but we were up around 70,000 US trash tokens for most of the weekend, which is great. So there you go. We've got the operational Sunrise Tech. We've got the operational money tech. We're doing great. Let's have a coffee, talk about what's new. Happy Monday, Nolan. Another beautiful day. It sure is. It sure is. And did y'all catch the Goy Bowl? I'm going to be talking about the Superb Owl. Some people call it the Super Bowl. I like calling it the Superb Owl. Sports ballers having a great time. I'll probably disappoint you. I did not watch the Bad Bunny show or halftime show, but I have good things to say about it. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for that. First, though, we've got to hear what the unbelievable legacy media has to say about stuff, because it's funny. First up, we've got some weather reports that are excellent, and I want to share them with you. So let's go. Does this allow me to share audio? There we go. Hopefully the audio thing just works now. I think it's changed. I think we're doing great. Why do I always screw this up? Nobody knows. We're going this way. We're going that way. We're doing our best. All right. So this is pretty fun. 2 years ago, March 2024, weirdly warm winter has climate fingerprints all over it, study says. But this year, what's up with this big freeze? Some scientists see climate change link. We love the hotter it's global warming, the colder it's global warming. We love it. Chris Martz, I can't stop laughing. Just 2 years ago, New York Times said that a mild winter weather has fingerprints of human-caused climate change all over it. But this year, the New York Times has changed their tune. Cold weathers are also proof of climate change. Don't you get it? It's climate change. It's changing, okay? Duh. How hard is this for you to understand? Climate change. This one is excellent. This one, you are going to like it. You're going to really like this one. This is from the Washington Post. I was worried with the layoffs that our supply, our dopamine hit of fake news would be gone. But no, maybe not everyone's out of their office yet, but because they've still got a great Shark Week story. Researchers say Discovery's programming overwhelmingly featured white men as experts while emphasizing negative messages about sharks. Shark Week lacks diversity, overrepresents men named Mike, scientists say. Mike, if your name is Mike and you fancy yourself a shark expert, I've got news for you. You should be fed to the sharks. We don't need you. We've got extra mics talking about sharks already. Okay, we're at the quota. All right, the Washington Post is letting us know. You didn't know, but I'm here to help you know. There is a quota on mics who can talk sharks. All right, mics and sharks, too many. Too many. According to scientists, the scientists counted the mic shark experts. Right? We laugh here sometimes. Oh, they can't count the amount of glaciers. They can't count the water. They can't count the monarch butterflies. I always say that unless they've got extra snorkels and they've got extra tools, it's really hard to count these things. But I believe they can count Mike shark experts. Shark experts named Mike is a countable number. They can get to the bottom of it. They got to the bottom of it, and it's bad news. Too many mics. too few sharks. All right. If we have more sharks, then I think we can up the number of mics that are allowed to talk about them as experts. And can you believe, right? They got all these white men experts, right? I'm all about experts, not listening to them, right? Especially if they're white, right? But what's all this negative messaging about sharks? Jeez, sharks of all fish, sharks. Jeez. White supremacy in action. Brought to you by Mike. So we did indeed have a superb owl over the weekend. The superb owl is being played in Colin Kaepernick's form. This is also from the Post. So just when I was worried, just as I said, our supply is going to be threatened by all of Jeff Bezos's not wanting to lose 100 million US trash tokens a year. But luckily, I think people were given a few weeks notice because the supply is still hot. Here we go. This is what we know. The Super Bowl is being played in Colin Kaepernick's former home stadium at a societal moment that echoes the issues he forced football fans to confront nearly 10 years ago after he kneeled during the national anthem of a 49ers game. What do we make of Colin Kaepernick now? Indeed, this is incredible stuff, really incredible stuff, guys. You got to see these articles. Colin Kaepernick, what has happened? We got more. This comes from the actual article. Here we go from the Washington Post. The most relevant figure to Super Bowl 60 is absent from it. Guys, the NFL player who you haven't heard about in 10 years is actually the most relevant figure. He's the most relevant. Please, Adam Kilgore, I hope you keep your job. It's ridiculous. I hope they don't fire you. I need you. We've got some more sports articles. The Olympics began this weekend. I didn't know, but it did. Here we go with the Olympics. So the headline, again from the Washington Post, is that J.D. Vance, here's the article, American star Alyssa Liu overcame a delay en route to the Milano skating arena caused by J.D. Vance's Vice President J.D. Vance's motorcade and finished second in the women's short program at the Olympics team event. But then if you actually read the article, this is what you find out. We almost didn't make it, Liu's coach Philip D. Guillermo said. Liu, who appears to live in a perpetual state of controlled chaos and was running late because she hadn't gathered all of her gear in time. She was running late. It's J.D. Vance's fault, you racists who don't see it. Obviously, he's anti-China. He doesn't believe she's a real American. I can mind read him. I have his mind reading ability. He was out to screw her over. We know it. This is also what we get from The Atlantic. Thank God for The Atlantic. This is what The Atlantic said. The Epstein files reveal that plenty of powerful people tolerated or participated in disgusting, shameful, and even criminal behavior. But they also bolster the case that there was never any grand conspiracy. There's nothing. There's nothing in the Epstein files. It's just bad people. It's just bad people, according to The Atlantic. They're just bad. They're bad. No grand conspiracy. Thomas Fazzi writes, powerful people colluding with each other in secret is the literal definition of a conspiracy. Wrong. You don't know what they were thinking, Thomas. They know. The Atlantic, they have so many mind readers. They got the mind readers out. They said, mind readers, I know you always know what Trump is thinking. Let's use that skill, right? Because they always know Trump is doing X, Y, because of course he hates Chinese people. Of course he hates black people. They know exactly what he's thinking. They know he's trying to make money for himself, right? He hates this and he likes that and all the rest of it. They always know. They always seem to be able, just as you're reading the article and you're saying, wow, this seems like a lot of conjecture. Boom, they come out and show you they can mind read. And they're like, oh, shit, I didn't know they were employing a mind reader. And then you're like, wow, that's great, right? Now, luckily, just when I told you, somehow, why do they only know how to read Trump's mind? No. They now know how to read everybody else's mind, especially everyone who is in the Epstein files. And they know it's just disgusting, shameful, and maybe even a little bit criminal. But if they all talk about it together, they didn't mean to have a conspiracy, all right? So they know what they're thinking. It's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. We get this as well from the Daily Mail. Statement announcing Jeffrey Epstein's death emerges from files, but it's dated a day before he killed himself in his cell. There's no conspiracy. Everything's cool. Don't worry about it. Everything's great. Oh, this is a great headline. Japan had some elections yesterday, and the government, the incumbent government that was already in power, that has only lost power one time since World War II ended, that is the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. They live in perpetual victory in Japan. Many people believe that the leadership convention to choose the leader of the party is the actual election that matters. So imagine there's been no change of government in many years, but here's Sky News' take on the no change of government and election that re-upped their total power in the Japanese Diet, is what it's called instead of parliament. Japan's ultra-conservative prime minister is set to seize more power after an exit poll had her securing a big majority in the country's lower house. Seizing. Gain power. It's already in charge. It's too good. Thank you, Sky News. Thank you very much. Many headlines of the sort. All right. Now, this was fake news, but it's part of our normal news. So we're done our NPC news section for the morning. Let me just get to a couple of comments here. Let's see what folks are saying. Indeed. Too many mics in the kitchen. Feed Mike to the sharks. Listen here, you dumb idiot. Reporting sunrise in Florida, but statewide freezing for Floridians at least. Bitcoin is running too. We like it. Where is it hot? TPUSA show was great. I did not see it. The super bowel. Oh no, thumbed. There you go, everyone. There you go. Bunch of the frogs will. Good morning, gang. Who won the World Series last night? I already had bread. Didn't have time to watch the circus. Escape the Matrix says I'll be in Vegas. I will definitely see you there. There you go. That's what we want to hear. Sounds like an AI-derived statistic. And why is the white shark so great? Why is the great white shark? Where's the great black shark? Right? What's happening? You're right. I never thought of that. Very important point you made. The great white shark. I suspect there are a little bit of white supremacy going on with the shark experts, especially all the ones named Mike. Right? Colin Kaepernick. Damn it, JD, you did it. The Atlantic CIA cutout, you got it. My favorite Epstein was a Russian spy story. Those are definitely my favorite. Hate that it works so well. Yes, the wallet is real great indeed. The Rumble wallet, Lightning will make it usable. NPC just flying by when having big fun. It's just a benign conspiracy. Love me some shark. Hard right whales and white sharks. Very good. Very good, everyone. Very good. I'm glad you're all in funny moods this morning. What is going on? Is this what is meant by broken brains, Nolan? You got it. Juice alert. You got it. Japan going back to samurai shit now. You got that. That's what's happening. There's the superb owl right there. Are these people still on diversity and climate change? They sure are. No, it's not AI, man. Familia Diaz, this is real. As a Puerto Rican, I am sorry about what we've been leashed upon you. Don't, Familia Diaz, let me tell you right now, it was not that bad. We're going to get into it. I didn't watch it, but I have a takeaway that's pretty good. So, and at least it's something different than you'll hear this morning. I don't want to be one of those shows that's like, oh, why do we have a Puerto Rican guy singing in front of people and it's in Spanish? It's just boring. You're going to hear that a bunch. There's enough people outraged about Bad Bunny. I'm not getting involved in that. That's not my story. I don't really care. He did do one thing that I thought was cool, so I'm going to bring it up. And I did see highlights from the Turning Point USA one. It did seem entertaining, and I hope they continue to do it. Why not have competition, right? Why do we all have to watch the same halftime show? So there you go. Definitely things I didn't like about it, but in general, I don't really care. I didn't watch it. All right, so here's some fun fake news that is relating to what we're going to talk about for the rest of the morning. Indeed, and it comes from our favorite Jemima. Jemima Kelly's back. I haven't heard her name in a long time. She wrote the same article, though. Everyone picked up on that. So here's Jemima writing this article, and she says Bitcoin is still about 70,000 US trash tokens too high. And everyone pointed out here on November 5th, 2015, Bitcoin falls over 100 US trash tokens in a day on reports of Ponzi scheme. So she's been writing the same article for more than 10 years. I remember that Jemima Kelly article back in 2015. I absolutely remember it. I remember what I was doing that day. I remember everything about that day. That was not long after the Canadian government had fallen to Trudeau. I was completely abandoned. I was on my own, working out of the decentral space in Toronto. And I remember when this article came out and we all laughed then. We all laughed. We were like, let's go buy more. Yeah. We had a big lineup, but we ran the only ATM in Toronto at the time. Huge lineup of people because Bitcoin was on sale. And we knew then something was up. So same journalist, can't make this up, but here's some fun stuff that people noticed about her take. Indeed, they had to start changing the article because they had written it originally as it was 69,000 US trash tokens too high. So you see it here, and that ended up having to get changed. The article had to get changed to 70 because it had gone up 1,000 US trash tokens in the very moment, in the time from which it was published in the morning to the afternoon. Pierre Rochard picks up on it and says here, today, Financial Times changed it to 70,000 US trash tokens. Financial Times are trying to quietly rewrite history, Orwellian and illegally fraudulent. So if you weren't around over the years, Jemima Kelly's had her mouth stuffed with comebacks and people pointing out how ridiculously stupid she is and how she's a symbol of the NPC sludge people journalism. It gets even better. Nick Carter here pointing out a new one, a fresh one for us to have. And here in the actual article where she writes this, she says, ask yourself, is this still going to be going on in 100 years' time? You're going to fail in 100 years. And Nick Carter says, look, I might be proven wrong again and again in my lifetime, but decades after both you and me are dead, I might be right. So take that. So, Nick Carter having funny with Jemima Kelly. Many people, of course, no one taking her seriously. But here's a really good take on just how rock bottom stupid some of these people are. And this comes from Zinks. And he says, the worst thing about the Financial Times article is not the blatantly incorrect predispositions about Bitcoin or the rather flippant attitude towards Bitcoiners. It's the very author herself. And I've met her and I can attest she is rock bottom stupid. You're dealing with an actual NPC sludge person here. And here she says, straight from university to journalism is usually a very telling sign in Britain. She's never had a real job and is in her 40s. The system has always worked for her. Of course, she doesn't understand Bitcoin. The typical rich kid who fails upwards and has no idea what life is like for the average person, but finds themselves working in media / politics / arts. You know the type. Didn't do a STEM degree, of course. It's never STEM with these lot. A life full of privilege. These types do not care to understand Bitcoin. And broken money affects them the least. The poor and those without assets will understand. People from Argentina or Turkey will understand. Contrarians will understand. Innovators will understand. The financially illiterate will understand. Those with the desire to be free will understand. The artsy-fartsy, pretentious upper-middle-class metropolitan elite with the least will be the last to understand. Jemima Kelly's a rich kid that's never lived in the real world, worked a real job, or run a business. So anything she says about Bitcoin should be taken with a large pinch of salt. Nonsense article. And really, there it is. That is the whole fight. I've been in media and Bitcoin for a long time. Everyone's always telling me, we got to go to the middle. We got to get the people in the middle. That's never going to happen. They're going to be the last people who understand about Bitcoin. The bell curve explains all. It was the high IQs and the low IQs, and it's just going to be continuing to pinch into the last person who's some midwit full of university degrees finally says, oh, no, I get it. The unfortunate thing is we've educated too many people and the education didn't go anywhere. If the top up of the tank is only so much, if the actual horsepower and IQ is only so much, doesn't matter how much information you put in it, they're not going to be able to synthesize any new worldviews. They're not going to be able to do any of this stuff. In the end, as we'll understand today, the only thing that matters, of course, is systems, and those systems having power or not, because the default of the NPC is to simply attach themselves to power structures and then move forward. And that's probably the only way we're going to win this fight. It isn't going to be logical. It isn't going to be intellectual. It's always going to be with actual doing, actual being, actual building. And you can see right now that that is the trajectory we're on. And that's why we don't need to argue with sludge people like Jemima Kelly. We just need to change the power structures. And that's already happening. It's been going on for years. Here's a note from Huberman talking about the difference that's going on with the GLPs and all of the new bro science, testosterone replacement, and peptids, and everything else that we see coming around. He says all the celebs now getting that retro to tide look. If you want to know what will be massive on legal prescription market 2 years ahead in the fat loss, muscle, vitality space, it always goes from bodybuilding, growth hormone, testosterone replacement, GLPs, retro to Hollywood to mainstream every time since the 80s. Justin Mahali here saying bodybuilders have been so far ahead on nearly every health, biohacking, cutting edge medical trend so far. Anybody else knew these things existed. And the same, let's say, dynamics, the same dynamics can be found. Hold on a second.
Sorry, receiving.
Yeah, I know. So in the same way that the bro science folks have remained ahead of the curve, in the same way that the, hold on a second. So in the same way that the bro science folks have figured out so much without the help of the midwit experts, they were able to do it again, just like in Bitcoin, from the top of the bell curve to the bottom of the bell curve, and have been able to adopt all of these healthy practices. We can see that the changing system, right, the system that is available to us, the system that a lot of Bitcoiners have understood, the bro science, were really just an outflow of the peer-to-peer information network, the removal of untrustable third parties, particularly when it comes to financial literacy and health literacy, right? Understanding all of these things. As a community, people have been well served in this information network, and it's what's allowed for all of this change to happen. Now, you can see this conversation that a lot of Bitcoiners noticed this weekend. It's Brett Weinstein saying we need a secure descent. And so this all comes from a lot of the Epstein and Bitcoin stuff, right? Which we're going to talk about, the Epstein and Bitcoin stuff. Brett Weinstein says we need a secure, decentralized, denationalized cryptocurrency. The problem with discussing Bitcoin in this context, it is impossible to distinguish those who believe in it and are therefore invested, and those who are invested in it and therefore believe. And he goes on further and says it matters because Bitcoiners derail discussion of alternative cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is taking up all the oxygen in the room. That's especially bad if it's already compromised. This post isn't about Bitcoin being broken. It's about the discussion being broken. Okay, all good points. But again, Brett comes from this world of credentialism. He comes from the high IQ world. No one would ever doubt Brett Weinstein is high IQ. I mean, he's probably got one of the top IQs in America, if I'm just, having to name people off the top of my head. But Marty Bent, who's no slouch himself, puts it in the actual context that we need. He puts it in the actual terms that we need to understand. None of what Brett says matters, right? Discussing who it is and distinguishing themselves, none of that matters. If you understand the architecture, the simple and elegant architecture of Bitcoin, you realize right away that the question is moot. It doesn't matter. Marty says people have literally been trying to do this for over a decade with no success. To answer Brett's problem about distinguishing legitimacy, the whole point of Bitcoin is you don't have to trust others. You can simply take the time to sit down and learn how it works for yourself. And of course, that's why I've come to the conclusion that forms of hypnosis, incentives, literal magic against the hallucinogenic spells, the dark magic of fiat that have been conjured and have hypnotized people over time is what we need to stop the hypnosis. It's not arguments and it's not logic. None of those things work. You need to systematically change how things are going and how the system works. And so Brett Weinstein here, I think, hinting that he still doesn't see a world without the form of credentialism that is reality in that realm, right? This need for experts and credentialists in order to verify things for you, when really you should be looking at systems that go around that go around the need for that. And that's what Bitcoin actually engineered out of the system: the need to trust people, the need for credentials, the need for trusted third parties. Trusted third parties are purely trust sinkholes. They're security sinkholes. There's nothing you can do about them. There's no way to engineer your way out of it except by changing the system. And so Bitcoiners have understood this for a very long time. And that's how we've been able to solve this problem of economic literacy, using our information networks, using the peer-to-peer meetup style information network, because credentialism simply didn't work. Credentialism simply did not work, and there's no need for it. That's why it was never part of any of these frameworks. That's why already back in 2015, when you had Jemima Kelly writing in the Financial Times about how Bitcoin lost 100 US trash tokens on its price, nobody cared. And that went from like 300, it was like a 25% drop back then, right? It was pretty big for the time. And did it change anyone's opinion? Not really at the time. I think most of us continued to do what we were doing. It didn't change my opinion back then. It probably caused me to have to sell some Bitcoin because I didn't have as much cash at the time, and we were all getting paid in Bitcoin back then, and less Bitcoin for cash. We were all operating already the opposite way. We all got paid in Bitcoin, and so just because it was easier to get paid in back then. So to the extent that we were bummed out that the price went down, yeah, a little bit, but it didn't change our outlook on what was happening. So the important thing here is that Bitcoiners have been able to spread this information amongst themselves. They've been able to increase the overall size of the peer network, of the peer-to-peer network. They've been able to cultivate a certain amount of financial literacy, health literacy, media literacy, energy literacy amongst the peers within Bitcoin. And that has positioned Bitcoiners really well for this incredible time of change we're in, because just as Brett Weinstein is still waiting around for someone to show him how to distinguish between different Bitcoiners, which is completely irrelevant, completely useless, we are reminded that that system of distinguishing and using credentialists has already completely failed us in the world of financial media and financial literacy. Here's Chris Martenson. He's got a new show, and you'll all remember him, of course, from Peak Prosperity. He's calling it the Renaissance Report. And in this one here, Volume 1, he talks about when money dies. And he goes through a look here of economic awareness, the evolution of money and systems, understanding debt and financial systems, the role of banks and money creation, the consequences of financial mismanagement, understanding debt and GDP dynamics, defining wealth, primary, secondary, and tertiary forms. The most important thing he did in this video, though, is point out that with all the bank models which exist, with all the financial models, all the economists, did you know that none of them even account for banks within their models? It's as rock bottom stupid and probably dumber than the global warming models, probably dumber than the global warming models. And here he discusses many of these things and why it's important. And I'll play just a quick video from it.
Years at either large company from my past. But in 2005, I lost my mojo for working for anybody at all. And so I began investing actively. I day traded stocks, futures, mainly gold. And I started that first blog in 2006. And by 2008, I created my signature piece, The Crash Course, which synthesized the topics of the economy, energy, environment, and exponential growth all at the same time at the systems level. Now, honestly, The Crash Course should have been a complete dud, right? It's just some guy merely speaking over PowerPoint slides in 20 chapters that initially took a little around 3 hours to wade through. But it was wildly successful. It became a book, an updated book, and an updated video series that is now patiently awaiting me to have enough time to update it again. And along the way, I was invited and I gave talks all over the world, in the UK Parliament, in Madrid, on PBS NewsHour, on peak oil conferences, you name it. Let's take a look here. Yeah, everything from talking to hippies at Kripalu over here to the Commonwealth Club. And but chicken on the desk, nice touch there.
Afford
cans of beans in the background, looks dark and drab. Anyway, kind of happy for that. I do wonder if Boston Mag would like to revisit this framing, because what did they say down here? They said down there at the bottom, he encourages followers to trust what they can touch: gold, stores of grain, barrels for conserving rainwater. Neighbors aren't just the people who live nearby, they're also potential allies who can save your life. Chickens produce edible dividends. Anyway, that's just how that went along. So the entire time, all 20 plus years, I've been as fierce a critic of the Federal Reserve, calling them financial terrorists as early as 2008. I've been a strong advocate for owning gold and silver, other hard assets. My instinct is to dive deep into the raw data and precise mechanisms that actually drive our financial systems. And when the data changes, I've freely, easily changed my points of view and opinions. I've probably forgotten the opinions I even had along the way. I've consumed a huge, enormous variety of opinions by a great many commentators and analysts, and often on the fly. I've conducted hundreds and hundreds of podcast interviews with truly amazing people. And so perhaps
I've slightly screwed up. It was the wrong quote. I thought I had it earmarked, but I'm going to skip it
until there's no more road left. And discouragingly, then they are going to, you know what they're going to do? They're going to write self-congratulatory books with multi-million-dollar advances for having the courage to print. Oh, act. Yeah, Ben, that was so courageous of you to print up so many hundreds and hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars. And the rest of them are they're just going to hand out medals to themselves for all the amazing things they've done. It's just, that's the system. Now, look, I've been wrong many times, particularly about timing. Things often seem to me to be more imminent than they actually were. You may find that you have that same experience as you go through this material. Everything has taken far longer than it should have to finally change. And I chalk that up to the fact that most people, again, they're rationalizers, not rational. And so this has led up to all kinds of just pretending as if things aren't as bad as they are. It really turns out that that's a pretty potent strategy. At any rate, the slow pace of actual change, it's really tempered me over the years. And back in 2008, when I had my first,
Anyway, I screwed that up. I thought I had knew where the clip was. The point is, he says in this video that one of the most damning things is that all of these economic models that came about during the '08 financial crisis literally didn't even account for banks. Like, banks aren't part of the models. They have all these different ways, thermodynamics and blah, blah, blah. And it's all bullshit. And one of the reasons why you can tell they haven't had any breakthroughs in the fiat sludge world when it comes to economics and understanding, why they haven't been able to really cultivate any form of financial literacy. And I mean this from the top levels, right? I worked for the Senate Banking Committee in Canada. I was I never worked as a lawyer, but I went through law school, worked on bank laws for several years, did very well in economics my whole life, always got really good grades. I had my high school economics teacher call my house when I got 100% on my final exam in my graduating year of high school. He always tried to encourage me to continue on in economics. And, I went very far in math, even though math has nothing to do with economics. So I had a very good background in all of this stuff. I studied the financial crisis in '08 very closely. And I've said it many times, I was actually illiterate until Bitcoin. Bitcoin helped me teach through contrast, right? Through contrast, what our system looked like by offering an alternative way of understanding financial systems through Bitcoin. So, and through the conversations I had with Bitcoiners, through the reading lists I shared and that were shared with me with Bitcoiners. Of course, as you all know, the Bitcoin rabbit hole is really just a reading list, right? It's a series of memetics you come up against. 21 million being the first. I would say second is don't trust, verify. Proof of work comes pretty closely after that as you start to tie the whole room together with these concepts. And they end up becoming a kind of operating system for you to understand the world. It is worldview forming, which is all I always separate Bitcoin from crypto at that fundamental level. Crypto is a hobby. It's consumer technology. Not all of it's a scam in the same way that Pokemon is not always a scam, but its effect on the world is no greater than Pokemon. And there are many failed Pokemon copies, so you always have to be careful of that. And it's absolutely an inside baseball game. The house always wins. The casino rules always apply. That's all true. Now, it isn't just a bunch of scammers. There's real people there, not many, but there are real ones. But nevertheless, even to its full extent, crypto is only equivalent to collectibles, baseball cards, casinos. They don't actually offer a worldview in the same way that Bitcoin offers the fundamentals, the operating system in which you can understand media, the banking system, incentives. You start to be able to understand things at a much greater level, right? Familia, I'd rather buy Pokemons over shitcoins. Yeah, but they're in the same realm, if you know what I mean. They're in the same realm, and free to buy whatever collectibles you'd like, right? Of course, I'm not promoting any crypto. I'm just trying to make sure you don't get blinded by hatred of crypto and make it something bigger than it really is. It's a hobby for some people. And Bitcoin does represent fundamentals to understanding the world in terms of energy literacy, media literacy, financial literacy, and so much so that you can learn about the systems that are failing just by their contrast with Bitcoin. As many people have said, they did not understand central banking because it was all too theoretical and there was nothing to compare it to. There was no measuring stick. And in the same way that Bitcoin offers a unit of account, it also offers a measuring stick by which you can, in the end, understand the systems that have come before it. The simplicity of Bitcoin and the contrast it creates with the experts working in central banking and the economists who can't even take into account banks in their models. It's as if they don't exist. Shows you why we are poised to finally change the system. And now that Bitcoiners have all of this literacy, understanding the underlying nature of our financial system, because once you see the simplicity of Bitcoin, compare it to the fractional reserve cabal, compare it to the system that Epstein was talking so highly about. And remember, he said in that Steve Bannon interview, if Americans and people in the world understood what was going on, they would have rejected it a long time ago. They would reject it overnight. If people understood fractional reserve banking, they would reject it overnight. And so you're seeing more and more people see this. And that's why a lot of these Rothschild names that are coming forward and coming through on the Epstein files are so important, because you're starting to understand exactly what motivated the system. In the same way that Bitcoin's elegance let you understand Bitcoin, right? The elegant design of Bitcoin. Remember, Bitcoin is a very simple combination of a couple of technologies. It's public key cryptography mixed with decentralized systems, mixed with the proof of work algorithm, organized in a protocol. I've often described Bitcoin in the same way as the bicycle. The bicycle, when it was invented in the 1800s, everyone knew the components: wheels, chains, gears, brake. Everyone understood the parts of a bicycle. Now, it was putting them all together in a way that turned it into magic. And once you saw the bicycle, you went, that's why you had all these retarded bicycles that were invented in the 1800s with the little wheel and the big wheel, because once you saw that you could go, that centripetal force would keep you going straight, it would keep you balanced. No one understood that, right? No one understood that the forward motion of biking and wheels lined up linearly like that could create balance. That's what made it magical the first time people saw the bicycle roll down the street. And once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. And Bitcoin had the same effect. That's where crypto comes from. That's why you have all these retarded cryptocurrencies, just like you had all these retarded bikes. I do believe one day it'll settle into a couple of bikes, right? The basic bike design, and then you can have a mountain bike and a road bike and a BMX, and there's other bikes, right? There's other bikes. There'll probably be other blockchains out there. There'll probably be other uses. Don't know for sure. I've always believed there'll be a few that make it. But now that we understand that the orchestration of these technologies is what makes the magic, once you see the orchestration and what it provokes, what it uncovers, what it aligns, what it systematizes, we were able to understand the fiat structures a lot better. But we still had some mysteries, incentives, why it works this way, how do you explain this, how do you explain that? And a lot of those answers actually are found in the Epstein files, and that's why lots of people are talking about it. Here's Mario Nawfal pointing out that Ariane de Rothschild, chairman of the Edmund de Rothschild Group, thanked Epstein's for a thrilling hunt. So there you go. Sightbringer says, this is the ash-covered outline of a gun that was never meant to be found. The Rothschild name sits at the apex of global finance. Ariane is not some peripheral player. She is the executive face of generational capital, seated at the helm of a bank whose clients include sovereigns, royals, and institutions that whisper policy into the ears of nations. She operates in a world where wealth is not measured in billions, but in control vectors, currency, credit, narrative, and access. She thanked Jeffrey Epstein for a thrilling hunt. The phrase is surgical, casual, unguarded, embedded in what was supposed to be a secure private loop. The tone is flippant, the word choice is ritual, a private theater peeking through a slit in the curtain. The response chain includes amazing old male, amazing hunt, and the line, my bankers should be careful. This is not the language of safari tourism. This is coded equilibrium signaling inside a system where humans are not always treated as ends, but as instruments. Whether the hunt was literal or metaphorical doesn't matter. The optics trigger reflex. The deeper pattern is what matters. Epstein was not just a predator. He was an interface. This is what I've been saying for the past few weeks, at least since this stuff came out, probably before, because this is how we had Mike Benz interpret a lot of this stuff. And as I've been saying, he was able to map the architecture of deceit when it came to media and the architecture of deceit when it comes to the incentives behind those media. The financial system is closely related and shaped pretty much the same way. Or at least they fit together like puzzle pieces. He brokered access between elite classes, state intelligence, and capital dynasties. The hunt may not refer to violence in the literal sense. It may be ritual, it may be leverage, it may be initiation, it may be debt collection. This email is a glimpse into the network layer that runs beneath the public operating system of the world. This is what I mean by perceiving this. Once you understand the system, there were still a few missing pieces, and those were the incentives underneath the system. Why? What fired the engine? What gave it its fuel? What allowed it to perpetuate? We knew propaganda was necessary to keep it in motion, but why? How could you align that propaganda? What behind it made everyone aligned? They're operating in a realm of shadow protocol. Legal veneer is a tool, reputation is armor, communication is coded. And the most revealing part of this message is the casualness. This wasn't a breach of protocol. It was a note of gratitude, a thank you for a service rendered. In this system, the real currency is participation. Once you're in the room, you either play the game or you're used by it. The hunt never ended. It just moved deeper underground. And a lot of people picking up on this. You've got Werner, Professor Werner, who's saying here, so now this is the connection to the British side. I guess that creep Mendelssohn, whose life is thankfully hitting a brick wall because of this. Here, Ilke John says, would you believe that not only did Epstein work for the Rothschilds, but by a remarkable coincidence, the Wiltshire home that Mendelssohn resides in, he rents from the Rothschild family. Werner says, it almost looks like the Rothschild dynasty has stayed in charge since Nathan R. bought the most UK government bonds, majority stock in the Bank of England, and jus prime noctis, the right of the first night with the Crown Princess Victoria's secret since Queen Victoria. Surely not. And indeed, that's what people are saying, that there is this huge pattern that's difficult to ignore now, and it goes back to the Lord Palmerston economic and foreign policy system in the UK, which is to divide and conquer, to fund both sides. Remember that Nathan R. Rothschild funded both the Napoleonic armies as well as the Wellington armies. And so he created a rumor the day of the end of the Battle of Waterloo and made the City of London believe that actually Napoleon had won. And so he ended up buying the entire market on a dime on the dollar. And many people believe the divide and conquer model was created right then and there. Many people believe this was the beginning of the anti-American system, that King George was still a king and that his loss of America created a vacuum inside the British system, and for a new system to be created so that nothing like the loss of America could ever happen again. And so from then on, from the Napoleonic Wars on, it looks like the funding of both sides, the creation of division in order that you can guarantee who wins and be aligned with the winner each and every time there's a conflict. That model really got going from then on. And of course, the US Civil War would be proof of that. Most of what we saw in the 20th century with Israel and Palestine and that whole question looks aligned with this whole theater as well. And so this system is what we're seeing now more and more coming out. And many people are perceiving that here. A leaked email reveals King Charles' aide oversaw royal protection at Epstein's home. The rot goes all the way to the top. Harrison Smith from InfoWars saying the Rothschilds have run Britain since Waterloo, and it's looking more and more like that is the case. Here's another take here on what's going on with the legacy news and why Epstein was able to get involved in this Rothschild model. Here saying, with the first few minutes of the Epstein interview, he mentions he was recruited. This is the Epstein interview with Bannon. He was recruited into the Trilateral Commission by Kissinger and Rockefeller because he understood fractional reserve banking. This is the central issue I have called attention to for 15 years as the legacy media and NPCs said everything they could to suppress this fact. This is a Rothschild model. And so we're starting to perceive the true nature of the system. Many people picking up on this, of course, and you're seeing it just, with the smoking guns like Epstein winning the lottery the day he goes to jail, right? This is hilarious to see how rigged the system is. Just one day after Epstein began his 18-month jail sentence in Florida, he luckily won an 80 million US trash token Powerball jackpot. People have been talking about this for a while, and it looks like it is the truth. Now, whenever you hear, because we're caught up in this now with the Epstein stuff coming out, of course there's FUD about Bitcoin. And here the World Mechanic had a great way of putting it. Yo, this post on Instagram is saying the files showed Epstein as Satoshi. Is this true? And this is the way to handle it, guys. The only way to handle it. You got to copy this because we're up against this type of hypnosis. You can't enter this frame of reality. If you enter the frame of reality that has been created by all of this hypnosis over the years and all of this dark magic, you're going to get lost very quickly. This is the way to handle it. Unfortunately, yes, he was the main guy, but there were others was the answer to Satoshi being Epstein. And then you say, who are the others? Thanos coded the halvings. Jimmy Neutron contributed the difficulty adjustment. Epstein and Captain Hook both wanted to use it to traffic kids, so they made sure the ledger was transparent. Perfect Cell contributed all the code that was buggy. Makarov from COD mined the Satoshi stash for Putin. Voldemort created the term magic internet money. And I handled the marketing. It was a team effort, but we're all Satoshi. So this is pretty much the only way to handle this stuff because, again, like with Brett Weinstein, what's important is the Bitcoin community has been able to get ourselves educated enough, financially literate enough, so that all that we're seeing with the Epstein files is not a surprise to us. This is on time. This is our worldview. We believed, we didn't have to define it. Just like with the US elections, we didn't need to define that the 2020 elections were stolen in a specific way. That wasn't necessary. The Bitcoin worldview of don't trust, verify was enough to know. If you couldn't audit the elections, what else did you need? What else did you need? You didn't need anything else, right? You did not need anything else. All you needed to know was they couldn't audit the election. that they had X amount of man in the middle potential attacks. They had machines with no one ever explained why we needed voting machines. There's still no reason out there. They're not faster. So what's the reason why we need voting machines? No one ever said it. Once you know that there's no reason given, no explanation, no argument, no one willing to make the argument, you know you're dealing with corruption. And Bitcoiners, because our worldview is don't trust, verify, didn't need more evidence than that. Just like we didn't need more evidence that there was some unseen hand inside of the financial system dictating incentives, dictating the type of worldview that the Jemima Kellys of the world would be displaying, that you knew that if you defined fears and wants in people's minds, you could actually create their reality. Bitcoiners understand this because we understand Bitcoin. We understand the power of money. Everyone loves money. That's never going to stop. That's part of the human mind. It's part of our operating system, and the actual money that you use and the system that goes into creating that money will go a long way to defining what you want and what you're afraid of in this world. And those two factors, the things you desire and the things you're afraid of, become reality. Bitcoiners have been arguing for a long time. We simply must reprogram the things people want and people are afraid of. The aesthetic of the Bitcoin worldview is what's important there. And we can do that by continuing to co-opt systems into the Bitcoin model, which is what's happening, which is why none of these models work for the financial reserve, which is why we are now seeing a complete recalibration of the banking system under this Trump administration. It's the same motivation that came with the changing of the election systems and SAVE Act, which we're going to talk about in a second. But now look at these new comments, for example, with our potentially new Fed chair speaking with Powell and what's going on with the Federal Reserve. Here's Kevin Warsh challenging the groupthink of the guild. So again, the groupthink is the hypnosis that I've been talking about. That is how you conjure groupthink. That is how you are able to compel people to think this way. Your models don't work, he says. This is what got Powell to say, bring it on if you have better models than the current Fed ones. Go back to what I just said about Chris Martin. Since the banks are not even in this model. They're ignored. They're just completely ignored. We clearly do. It pisses him off and the establishment big time. So here he says, the fall in global nominal GDP from the pre-crisis period to the post-crisis period is alarming. Economic policy makers, including central bankers, failed to deliver the economic outcomes that they promised. Monetary policy in particular is not readily reducible to a set of immutable truths. Too many in the professorate rely on, to our detriment, on the Fed fine-tuning of policy, on the outputs of their preferred models. I am troubled by Fed fine-tuning and policy and overpromising of benefits. Measurement challenges are growing faster than our underlying of inflation dynamics. The Fed is preoccupied with its vaunted forecasts. Instead, it should focus on considerable energies on more troubling contemporaneous developments in the real economy. And indeed, that is what Bitcoiners have been saying for a while. And indeed, that is what the American system is. We're seeing a resurgence of this American system that doesn't go through these intermediaries, that doesn't go through the Jemima Kellys at Financial Times, that doesn't go through with these unspoken power structures that we see in the UK with the funding of both sides to create division in order to harness control. Craig Tyndale saying, yes, as outlined by Alexander Hammond, folks, remember freedom and liberty, yet forget the founding condition of freedom as outlined by Hamilton was manufacturing and resource access. The international free market nonsense came along in the 70s and is not an American tradition. Free markets domestically or with allies, but not with rivals. That's suicide. And indeed, why we're seeing so much of this new American system pierce through with the new Fed chair, with the Trump administration, with their Bitcoin strategic reserve. And even just like the banks weren't in the old model, the banks are in the new model. Palmer Luckey here talking about the Erebor Bank, which is now set to have its first customers. I think it started yesterday. Erebor Bank, which will cater to startups and high net worth individuals, on Friday became the first to receive a national bank charter under the second Trump administration. Palmer Luckey saying the real bank for real Americans doing real things, not financial engineering, not Rothschild derivative banks, not UK aligned financial mismanagement with all of their credentials, with all of their economist talk, none of the technobabble, the same technobabble people that told you, George, that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Imagine those same financial analysts would have no problem saying, look at the vote count, look at the output of the voting machines, not understanding all of the incentives that went in for that deception and that dark magic hypnosis. So here he says the cutting edge business model is based on next gen concepts like don't let your clients' money disappear, care at all about national security, and most importantly, the market sometimes goes down. So indeed, we see the new system coming through, and it's just in time because the old system is being cleaned out very quickly. Here's Kevin Warsh talking about the Fed Treasury Accord stirs debate in the 30 trillion bond market. What he's talking about here, Kevin Warsh has called for a new accord with Treasury Department, overhauling the relationship between the two institutions with a new version of an agreement from 1951. A revamp could be bureaucratic tweak with little near-term impact, but a more ambitious effort could see increased volatility and concern over the U.S. central bank's independence. A new accord could spell out that the Fed would only make large-scale Treasury purchases with the Treasury's endorsement, or lay out a plan for the Fed to shift its portfolio to bills, which could have implications for the bond market and the Fed's independence. Kevin Warsh floated plenty of ideas of how he would run the Federal Reserve during his campaign for the job as chair. For Wall Street, few are as cryptic or potentially consequential as his call for a new accord with the Treasury Department. What this basically means is what I've been saying for a long time, that he will be subordinate to Bessent, that you are having the Federal Reserve more or less castrated in its role to determine what the Treasury does. We are seeing the American system become the dominant incentive creator in the entire flywheel of the global economy, not the banks, which looked captured as of World War I and all of the events of the 20th century that followed. Zero Hedge saying for the cheap vibe coded algo seats, yield curve control is about 12 out of 10 on the dovish scale. And what I see here that's important that goes against what they're saying is you're seeing the subordination to the Treasury, the reinstallation of the American system. And here you have the Chinese, I think, getting out of that system just as quickly. Here they're saying China has instructed banks to begin selling and limit purchases of U.S. government bonds amid concerns that U.S. debt may expose banks to sharp swings. So apparently the Chinese are getting out of the system. China is making its intentions clear. First, context matters. China has been reducing their U.S. bond holdings and have almost cut them in half since 2018. Second, as I said in the post below, if we start to see a lack of faith in T-bills, T-bonds, metals will run hard. T-bills, of course, are short-term debt. T-bonds are longer-term debt. So what this looks like is China indeed getting out of this global system. Now, America looks like it has solutions for this, but they look even more similar to what China is already doing. When people say that China betrayed the Rothschild bank system, the UK cabal, go back to the financial crisis. All of this goes back to the financial crisis, as we've seen from the Epstein files. To me, the Epstein files, the most valuable piece so far is all of the insight into the financial crisis, because that's the fight we've been on for the last over 10 years, of course, as Bitcoiners. So when people say, and you hear Alex Jones say this quite often, that China double-crossed them, what China did to double-cross them was not go down with the ship in 2008 and instead invest heavily in energy. When China invested heavily in energy in that period, they chose a new system. And it's still confrontational and competitive against the US system. But nevertheless, the system that the Chinese have chosen is to create tons of electricity, tons of energy, and to try and increase the quality of life for its people and for the people that are within its system. And so they chose a different system than this British one. And it looks like the Russians have also chosen to get out from under the system. So you've got these different participants that are making these decisions to leave and exit the system. So I don't see this as necessarily anti-American system. This is anti-British system, because the American system that's coming in is competitive with the Chinese system. It is about energy. And here Jensen Huang talks about it in terms of building the next once-in-a-generation infrastructure output. He says here, Jensen Huang is right. The next 7 to 8 years will be historic build-out of AI data centers. We are constructing the backbone of the intelligence economy. After that, the frenzy slows. The focus shifts from expansion to running and maintaining the infrastructure that powers everything. And I think you're going to see this shortly.
It's not like roads. Roads, once you lay it down, it stays fairly useful for a long time. The way computers work is you build up the infrastructure, but then you start replacing it 5, 6, 7 years later. And so I think it's going to take us some 7 years, 8 years to build up to the level that we have to sustain. And after that, we're going to be refreshing and slightly growing. And so we've got several years of build out ahead of us. It's not like roads. Roads, once you lay it down, it stays fairly.
I'm just trying to find one extra note that I had here. Oh, that's not what it was. 1 second, I gotta erase a few of these. I had one more file I wanted to keep here because it was someone making a prediction based on what they saw from that quote and energy buildup. I'm not going to use it now, but I forgot to bring it up in my notes, and I think you guys need it. All right, here's a good one too. One second. Oh, I forgot I had another fake one here. I'm going to use it. I didn't get far enough in my notes today, unfortunately, it looks like. There we go. Okay. Found it. Okay. All right, I'm back. I'm back on it. So Jensen Huang here saying that all of these data centers, you have to build all this stuff out. Of course, I've been saying for a long time, every one of these data centers will have a Bitcoin component to it, and that the Bitcoin component to it is important because it actually underlines the flywheel, the psychological engine behind these systems. And what I mean by that is Bitcoin is always, just like AI, been valuable to the grid because it really solves energy finance. It gets the government out of the energy finance game. And it actually creates a private way of funding all of these energy buildouts. Now, I imagine there'll be some military style incentives, so the government will be somewhat involved in it. Again, I believe the colonization of Greenland and the colonization of the northern parts of Canada will be according to the old system of American colonialism, not the British financial extraction model, but the just go and build model. And so America will get as much as Greenland as they can build. They'll get as much of the Arctic in Canada as they can build. And you're going to see these huge companies go up there. I believe you are going to see Trump order Facebook and Amazon and these other large companies to head to the north. They're going to be bringing along small modular nuclear reactors, and they're going to start colonizing in the American system about growing the base, growing the economic footprint, growing the size. And we have to go to the north because we've got to practice in hostile conditions, because you've already got SpaceX here this morning talking about how they're not going to be using Mars right away as the location to build bases. They're going to practice on the moon. And here Elon Musk says, for those unaware, SpaceX has already shifted focus to building a self-growing city on the moon, as we can potentially achieve that in less than 10 years, whereas Mars would take 20 plus years. The mission of SpaceX remains the same: extend consciousness and life as we know it to the stars. It is, 1 second. So here you see him talking about building these citadels. It's more or less a Bitcoin citadel that Elon Musk is talking about building on the moon. Here he says it's only possible to travel. He goes into the details, but why he's doing it, and that you'll be able to begin in 5 to 7 years. They'll be in the Arctic sooner because you've got to figure out these huge temperature swings and building in these really crazy climates. Now, that's not the only thing Elon is, of course, working on. And I'll explain why both the voter fraud issue as well as the city building issue are key to understanding and predicting what's happening next. The first way you can do it is to go back to this American system and realize that the next election is going to be around these data center questions as well. 100 here's the data coming out: 125% surge in data center opposition. You're already seeing the fiat sludge people get motivated. They don't want more electricity. Adam Townsend said, as I said before, we all know Dems are going to activate the industrial activist complex that they keep in retainer to raise all hell about launch, data centers, nukes, and they mill-treated legislation that eventually halts financing and insurance vehicles. And they will, yeah, there you go. But it's not going to work. And that is because the incentives, of course, are changing. And the incentives around the elections are what is important right now. And the incentives around elections with what other project Elon Musk is working out, of course, the SAVE Act. Here's Elon saying critical to avoid fraud, talking about voter fraud and why it's so important. And this gift says Elon is right. Banning mail-in voting is critical to avoiding fraud in our elections. During the 2020 election, Pennsylvania sent out 1.8 million mail-in ballots, but received back 2.5 million mail-in ballots. This accounts for Biden's fraudulent and impossible 682,000 vote spike, which were counted with no observers and were all for Biden, which magically just happened to be enough to steal Trump's almost 700,000 vote lead in Pennsylvania before swing states shut down counting locations at the same time to steal the 2020 election. Pennsylvania's own Secretary of State website then wiped the 2.5 million mail-in ballot number after the total number was questioned. Trump won the 2020 election in a landslide. Probably, right? Probably. But just like we understand, Elon understands these incentives. And so here says incentives explain behavior. And sanctuary states aren't defending illegal immigrants out of empathy. They're defending their congressional seats and allowing a permanent underclass. Just a second. So here's Elon saying incentives explain behavior. And he's talking about Arthur McWaters and this quote here saying they're defending their congressional seats and allowing a permanent underclass. Ironically, this is exactly why slave states fought to count slaves in the census. Literally exactly why. Read the original documents from the Constitutional Convention. It's not empathy, it's the opposite. They're fine with human beings being subjected to a terrible life as long as they count toward power in Congress and electoral votes. It's demographic gerrymandering, and tens of millions of illegal immigrants are the pawns in this strategy. And Elon says incentives explain behavior, which is exactly why you're going to have the SAVE Act, which is exactly why this argument and fight, this economic fight about energy systems is so important, why the American system of building versus the financialized banking system of extraction are going head to head, and why it's going to be about sludge people and food stamp money versus actual money that helps bring people to space and incentivize a increased understanding and awareness amongst humans and increased wealth. Luckily, our brain dead senator, remember, I'm the first guy to say this guy was great. I went for him over Dr. Oz. You all remember that. I said straight up in the 2022 midterms 4 years ago, I said I like Fetterman. I said this guy is great. And I love the brain damage. I love that he had a broken brain and he needed models to show his brain was all fucked up. I thought he was great from the minute I saw him. We like the half-brained senators. They're the best. They're better than the full-brained ones. And so now he obviously is going with Republicans, and he gets that this voter ID thing is important. He says, I do not believe that it's unreasonable to show ID to vote. Fetterman is right once again. Fetterman for leader of the Democrat Party, I think, in many ways. And indeed, the incentives matter. And that's why winning these fights, winning the economic output fight, winning the Wall Street fight, winning the energy finance fight, winning energy literacy, media literacy, all these things matter. Winning the voter ID fight are the important fights of our time. But the good news is the fake news has become so weak, and the fiat sludge people are becoming too few, and the conjuring ability of the fiat system is weakening and weakening. And we can see it more and more. And finally, we're getting some historical relooks. We see here from the New York Times actually admitting, remember, this Nixon story is how I predicted you would get Robert Kennedy in the race in 2022, because that was the famous Tucker Carlson episode where Tucker said, do you know who the most popular US president in history is? It was Richard Nixon in 1972. So how was he destroyed in so little time? And it goes back to Kennedy. It goes back to the loss of civilian control. An important aspect of the American system is civilian control of the military. And we haven't had that since this whole system descended on America. We haven't had civilian control of anything. We haven't had civilian control of the government accounts. Just like I said, we had the Federal Reserve that was really the fire inside the economic engine, and that the Treasury was, again, civilian control, but it wasn't. So what Besant represents is the civilian control of government debt issuance and the creation of money using government debt issuance, or the creation of fiat money using the government. So imagine we had fiat money not created by the government. We had it created by the private banks. We had no insight and ability to have civilian control of money supply using the American system. We had no ability to have civilian control of the military using the American system. We had scammed votes, complete and total opaque control over the military. No one knows who's been in control of the military all these years since Kennedy was assassinated. There's no way to tell. Was it the president? Doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like it. Was Trump the president of the military the first term? Not so much. Parts of it, it looks like parts of it observed him as and acknowledged him as the commander in chief, but not all of it. And so we have this article today from the New York Times finally admitting, I actually lost friends recently over this debate where they said, Nixon was a crook. And I just said it's not true. Now, I didn't argue with them. So by saying lost friends, the amount of insults I took over that dinner just made me say, do I really want to hang out with these fucking sludge people anymore? Even though they're old friends of mine, old, great friends of mine. But not even being able to see the story about Nixon, they thought Nixon was a crook. I said, these people are irredeemable. They can't be helped. And so what am I supposed to say about that? I just finished my dinner and I haven't called them back since, because I don't really want to have that. It's like going back to kindergarten. Why would I have a conversation with people who don't even understand some of the most basic points of reality? And these are so-called conservatives in Canada. So obviously Canadians are the stupidest people in the world. You don't have to tell me twice. But didn't even understand the most basic parts, that Nixon was set up to fail, that Nixon was completely framed and it was fake. Well, maybe now that it's in the New York Times, they might actually see it, but of course they won't, because they're sludge people. So here, New York Times, new article by the New York Times reveals that Nixon was genuinely persecuted. Lee Kwan Respecter makes the more important point, though, and this is what I'm saying, and this is why you can bet your bottom dollar, you can bet your last Satoshi, that the system is changing. And Lee Kuan Yew Respecter says Nixon would have 100% survived Watergate today. It would be immediately called out as a deep state plot. Roger Stone would be on live stream calling it play-by-play. They would have won the information war. We would not have been convinced. He would not have been convicted in the Senate, and he would have had his place in history as a hero of the Republican Party and the conservative movement. He's been a hero of mine from day one. I've loved this guy. I've thought he was the greatest president of the post-World War II period. I've always been a huge fan. I liked him way more than Reagan. I was always a Nixon or die guy. Since I'm a teenager, weirdly, I've liked him since I was a teenager. And so here, I think that's totally right. And it's important to acknowledge this, because indeed, they couldn't have run this op today. And that shows you how close we are to systemic change, because this op indeed would have failed. And the failure of this op would have changed all of history. So lots of people picking up on this article today. Jeffrey Tucker saying, fascinating piece appearing in unlikely venue. TDLR, Nixon was the victim of a deep state plot so complex and enormous he could not fathom it. Trump is smarter, purging his enemies before they purge him. And indeed, this comes from 7 pages of a sealed Watergate file sat undiscovered, and people are seeing it more and more. Now, what I will say with this whole new system is Trump is emerging out of this, and I think creating, because he's learned from these problems and he has a different profile, a different power profile, a different way to circumvent the media. He himself is more powerful than the legacy media, and he's got all of these crazy Bitcoiners and all of these other people that form part of this populist base, and this populist base has a very different outlook on democracy, has a very different outlook on these systems, this banker system versus the American colonial system, the banker extractive colonial model versus the American colonial model, which is build, 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 build. The people who go and build should be getting benefits from building. They should be able to accrue the value that comes from building more. So this is where I'll say a nice thing about Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny didn't mean to, but he was basically talking about the American colonial system in a positive light. Here he says, God bless America, and starts talking in this video about the different peoples of the American. And he blesses all of America, which I'm 100% for. He says, you might not get it today, Mal Washington says. You might not accept it, but Bad Bunny's performance was a soft power play to forward the aims of the Donroe Doctrine. Indeed, you need to start seeing the entire continent as, because that's what was stopped. That's what was stopped by this banker divide and conquer Rothschild system that you can even see here from... just to underline it further, here's another Epstein file that would be important to acknowledge. This comes from the Barclays Bank, right? The public will never revolt against those pedal bike elites, say ex-Barclays CEO, right? Former Barclays CEO Jess Staley told Jeffrey Epstein in 2014 there would never be a real uprising against the pedal bike elites because people had already been distracted, not least by bread and circuses. But that doesn't work anymore. And we're seeing more and more that all of these pedal bike people notice. And that whole system is what was put in place to keep anything like the Monroe Doctrine from happening. That's why the rebooted version of the Donroe Doctrine is so important. So I don't know what role Bad Bunny has in any of this, but his acknowledgement is natural to see the entire continent from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego as one. And that is America. And the United States of America will be all of that. And it's going to have a different configuration, different levels of sovereignty for each individual state than we see now, different ways of combining power in Washington, D.C. than we've seen now. But it will reach a new form of equilibrium, and it will be much better for everyone involved and will vitally increase the systems around the world. So, and you can see if the election stuff does get changed, like I'm saying with the SAVE Act, I've been saying the Democrat Party is toast for good, circling the drain. I think November 2026 will see the end, the actual end of the Democrat Party if this voter ID thing goes through, and I think it will. Here's Ben Q saying Minnesota might actually flip red. You probably wrote off Minnesota a long time ago. Everyone did. This is the only state in the country that voted for Mondale in '84. No Republican has won statewide there since 2006, but something is happening right now that should be on every conservative's radar. Democrats just got caught sitting on $9 billion U.S. trash token and welfare fraud. Billions stolen from taxpayers while Tampon Tim looked the other way. The scandal got so bad he dropped out of the governor's race entirely. Now the Republican frontrunner Lisa DeMuth has the kind of record that makes Democrats lose sleep. She killed their assault weapons ban. She ended taxpayer funding of healthcare for illegal aliens. She forced massive spending cuts to clean at the deficit they created. Tampon Tim literally said there's one person stopping us and pointed right at her because she was the only thing standing between Minnesota and the entire radical agenda. Her running mate, Ryan Wilson, fought on the legal team that stopped the left from removing Trump from the Minnesota ballot. He co-hosted a major Trump fundraiser. He came within 0.3% of winning statewide in 2022. This matters beyond Minnesota. If we flip that, Democrats have held for 50 years. It sends a message that no blue state is safe anymore. The Democrat brand there is in ruins. The strongest conservative ticket in decades is on the ballot. This is the year. So I think that's what's happening. And again, just look at the difference, right? Look at the capacity, like we heard from the Watergate story. Probably couldn't have won, right? Probably couldn't have won. Probably not going to be able to do it. Take a look at that. Look at what's going on energy literacy. Like I said, it looks like the Democrats are going to go with the no more electricity, like don't make more electricity, just keep our bills cheap. Also not a winning strategy. Look at what we heard from Elon Musk. Incentives determine people's behavior. It's not arguments, it's incentives. It is power structures. It is aligning with power structures. But to get people to align with their power structure, you actually have to do good things. You actually have to accomplish things. And when you see these extractive systems, taxing fraud, that changes people's minds. That actually works. With voter ID in place, with an economic system oriented towards actual productivity, with America getting peace in its own continent by helping other places get rich, like Cuba, like Venezuela, like Canada, getting too poor to take care of itself. Incentives there keep Canada out of the world of our nationalistic, sentimental values. All of that changes very quickly if the Genius Act is loaded and you get 10% interest on US dollar holdings as a Canadian, and you get the 1% on Canadian dollars. The Canadian system collapses like that, and you're seeing it. And the important thing is that you've got all of these systems changing at once. Healthcare is another great example. Look at this. And then the messaging with it. Here's Kennedy himself from his own handle, using the Mike Tyson tattoo on his face, eat real food. Just like we heard before, there's going to be, from the bro science guys, a massive change in health configuration of Americans. Bro science is absolutely taking off. And if you thought like the banks were corrupt, the health food industry was much more corrupt than even the banks. And the banks were talking about hunting people and no one catching them. So just think about how bad it is. And now you've got folks like Kennedy, who was in this game because they killed his father, they killed his uncle. And when that whole story about Nixon and the fake news, and Nixon and Watergate being fake news, tied inextricably to his actual opponent in the 1960 presidential election, John F. Kennedy, it's the same story. It's the same thing. They didn't pop Nixon's head off because they realized exactly how hard it was to do when they were dealing with Kennedy, and they needed to maintain their opaque and hidden shadow control over the U.S. military and the U.S. financial system. Nixon did his best to fight against them. It didn't work in the end, and he was booted out and assassinated in another way, the same way they tried to assassinate Trump, using all of these fake lies, corrupt, this and that. But it is the difference in systems. So it is about productivity. You've got him, Kennedy, talking about eating real food, very important stuff. But just look at the competition again, right? It's the sludge people in Minnesota. It's the sludge people in the blue states. But just look globally at the system. This is how you know we're going to win. Look at what I said about Palmer Luckey, a new bank, new systems. These are happening before our eyes. But look at our competition, right? Here's what the old system produced: the bureaucracy, the never-ending debt, the banks hidden from the financial models, real costs hidden from financial decisions and from incentives. And that's how you end up getting this, right? Look at the cost of those ridiculous bottle caps in Europe. And I have to use those stupid bottle caps here often in Barbados because we get stuff from the UK, and the UK has to do these dumb bottles with the little thing attached to it. And you can't even take it off. But did you know how much it cost? Implementing the mandatory tethered bottle caps in the EU required for containers of up to 3 liters as of July 2024 is estimated that the cost of the beverage industry between 2.7 billion euro trash tokens and 8.7 billion euro trash tokens. These costs stem from the need to re-engineer product lines, update machinery, and redesign packaging. And of course, Michael Arouet says here, we have laughed countless times about the world-famous EU bottle caps, but take a look at how expensive the implementation was. How is such nonsense even possible? Wouldn't it make more sense for Europe to invest in new technologies like AI instead? The best part of it is they actually put a they actually did announce all of their big they did make a big announcement in France about AI coming into Europe, and they're going to attract everyone. And do you know how much money Macron offered? It was 30 million euros. And Paul Marlucki said, my house costs more than that, and I'm a guy. And indeed, most of the contracts out there for AI technologists were in the billion range, not 30 million. They're in the billion. Even 30 billion would not be enough compared to what the United States and others are spending. So very funny that these guys are going for it. And that's why it is just not working. And go back to the healthcare argument, right? Incentives matter. Here's Trump coming out with the Trump prescription plan, right? People already noticing huge savings. Starting tonight, dozens of the most commonly used prescription drugs will be available at dramatic discounts for all users throughout the new website, trump.rx, trumprx.gov. Even Mark Cuban said, great work. Here, Evan says, if a Democrat president did something like this, the media would be hailing them as a champion of the people, but instead, he has received barely any coverage. But that doesn't matter. You don't need to be a crybaby. People will notice this stuff, and this is exactly how you win. It is incentives. It is cost of stuff. And the fun part of all of this is the world is just changing so quickly that we're getting to a point where even we're starting to question how much of our healthcare system was really just an extension of the financial system and the broken incentives. Because as this previous financial system breaks, suddenly we're getting breakthroughs in healthcare. It's not just the cheap medicine. It's not just the eat real food from RFK. We're getting even better stuff here. This just happened over the past couple of days. Now, I don't know how much of this is exactly true, but I'm definitely going to go with my confirmation bias here. We see today my X feed is overflowing with actual medical breakthroughs. Mexican scientists eliminated HPV. Spanish researchers cured prostate cancer in mice. Japan restored motor function in paralyzed patients via regenerative medicine. Korean scientists report reversing colon cancer. Vietnamese clinicians show blood cancer can be completely treated. What? Biomedical science is advancing at an unprecedented and accelerating pace. A genuinely great day for medicine. Happening very, very fast, and we love to see it. Now, all of this is also having other ramifications. And I think the story, just like a movie, right? We love the dramatic endings of movies, and we're entirely brainwashed onto these dramatic endings, which is why many people believe that Trump has been fighting a propaganda war for a long time in order to both cultivate interest in the story and cultivate interest in, because you can't be told about stuff like Epstein. That is what comes through all of these emails where, just like we read that one from the Barclays Bank guy, right? And lots of people talking about how so much of this was on email and just sort of not even coded, just up front. And that's why I said a few times last week, the biggest story is the lack of fear of getting caught, because the people seem to have understood that even if they're caught, no one would believe it. Just like the Nixon story, right? Just like we saw from the Nixon story when I mentioned that, people would not have even believed what happened, and that Nixon's the plot here from Jeffrey Tucker, right? That a plot so complex and enormous he could not fathom it. Trump is smarter, purging his enemies before they purge him. Trump is also smarter in that he has gotten people to want answers to these questions. He's gotten people into his own form of hypnosis, which is why I talk about wrestling kayfabe. The kayfabe in wrestling is when the wrestlers noticed that the hypnosis was strong and that it was pulling people in. And because it's a real-time thing, it's like it's art. It's not something you can plan. You can think you've got good kayfabe and then it doesn't stick. They noticed when it when it stuck, they would make a match go longer if the kayfabe was high, if they had enough people buying into the story, rooting, cheering on outcomes. And this is what Trump does. He gets people involved in the story. They get them to root and cheer for outcomes. Bitcoiners, of course, have everything in the game. All the skin is in the game to change financial systems, rooting for an outcome, of course, rooting for a change in operating system for the world, and one where these things are not true anymore, where distractions and bread and circuses can't be used in order to hide a completely corrupt vampiric system. So Bitcoiners playing this game pretty hard and now in a position, I think anyway, to completely see it through. And now that we have this appetite for change and new information and new systems, the ability to question exactly how many things were hidden by the old system. It wasn't just that we didn't have civilian control of the military. It wasn't just that we didn't have civilian control over government debt issuance. It was way worse than that. And so people's minds are open to just how far the rabbit hole goes and just how far the deception stretches, which is why stories like this are going viral. Many people always wondering what's going on in Antarctica. I don't know what's going on in Antarctica, but I got a lot of questions. And just like a movie, just like kayfabe, you see this stuff coming out now. So this is a guy who tried to live stream the other day from Antarctica using his Starlink. He pulled it off briefly on land, but back on the ship, crew swarmed him midstream, confiscated the Starlink dish, citing vessel policies, security rules, and Antarctic treaty bans on personal satellite gear. What don't they want people to see? Of course, this seems completely crazy and doesn't make sense. This is the second time in the past few months we've seen this. Now, I've been invited to Antarctica many times. I won't go because I don't want to cross the sea. I don't like seasickness. See, Vince, no audio and your mic was cutting out. I don't know. That might be you. I feel like all my stuff has been working, but who knows? Let's see what the folks are saying. Bitcoin. Oh, yeah, I've lost friends in that manner. Fetterman is the real life scarecrow we need. We love Fetterman. Get busy. Doesn't matter what. Keep moving. Indeed. Wow. Set the controls of the heart, the sun. Wow, the football rabbit hole just got deep. Go on, Count. Do tell. Well, I'm just saying that, Bad Bunny was talking about a cohesive American, a cohesive Americas. And I think that's where things are headed, to a cohesive continent of America. So there you go. Owen Benjamin. Yeah, Owen Benjamin is not a... bad actor is not the way to describe it. You don't know what Owen Benjamin's incentives are. So, and I don't know what they are. All I see is someone doing some form of performance art. Now you can respect the art, but don't forget it's art. It's not for you. It's not to be useful to you, right? He's trying to be useful to him, which is fine. But he's got a bunch of incentives that you don't see and don't understand. And I don't know what they are either. But I don't see someone who is aligned with telling you the truth as he sees it. Now, that's different than saying things and being wrong, right? So I don't believe he's saying things and being wrong. I believe he has some incentive that you don't see, just based on the nature of timing. I can't mind read him, but I don't trust anything that guy says. Again, use your Bitcoin really test. He's one of these people that will fall for the Epstein created Bitcoin type of storyline. I'm not sure if he did, because I stay away from his content because it is so spiked. It's all spiked. It's not, it's spiked. Something's in it and you don't understand what it is. It's being spiked with some incentive that you can't see. I can't see it either. I just stay away. To me, he looks like a drug dealer trying to spike people's drinks. That's what I see. Now, I could be wrong. That's what I see. So I try not to take his information even into my calculations for that reason. You don't know where he's coming from. I don't know where he's coming from. So, and I've looked, and if I can't find it, something's up. I can't find where his incentives are coming from. So there you go. And trust me, I've tried. So there you go. Basically, anytime I see a very strong communicator, which he is, and their Bitcoin message isn't aligned with what a lot of Bitcoiners are thinking, I'll find out why, and if I can fix it, and turn him into a Bitcoiner. I've done that for many years, and very successfully done it for many years, with many high-profile names that you all know. I was generally their first contact with Bitcoin, where I would reach out to them before anyone in Bitcoin was really talking about them, found a way to get them involved, found a way to get them at events, invited them to events, paid them to come to events, and then just let the Bitcoin ecosystem take its course on them and see how they come out on the other end. In his case, I didn't even extend the invite because I said something, it won't work. If you don't understand where they're coming from, it won't work. They have other motivations. And so I wasn't able to clear him in my own calculations to make it worth my while to reach out to him and try and benefit from his skills, which are real. He's got real skills, right? I'll admit that any day. There's one of the most talented persuaders on the X app. But nobody knows, or I don't anyway, where he's coming from. And so that's an important missing piece. I don't need to know where you were born and who raised you. It's not like that. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to know under what circumstances you found Bitcoin. Because if it doesn't, my book, The Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management, your Bitcoin first contact story is generally representative of some subconscious hang-up you have with Bitcoin. He does not fit into the mold, which means it's something else. And if it's something else, because those patterns that I created in that book are observed from a lifetime, for the entire lifetime of Bitcoin, I've been observing people. I've been able to categorize enough responses, enough roadblocks to understanding Bitcoin to be able to cure people, I guess you could say, or to the extent that you can cure people. But in his case, when it doesn't fit the mold, you got to wonder what's going on. And so that's what I saw. So agreed on Nolan, an odd duck. Yeah, exactly. I don't follow him, just check in on the lunacy once in a while. That's exactly what I mean. Yeah. Nolan the Baptist, Orange Billing them all. Count, Celebrity Calculator, Interactive Inner Compass. Pretty fun. Great book, Nolan. You all should have it. Indeed, it is a fun book. So, yeah, there you go. Sly sense of humor. What do I have? What's going on? 1 second. Okie dokie. 1 second. I've got my mom coming in today, so that should be fun. She's getting out of Canada for a couple weeks, coming to stay here. Back to this one. Nope, that's not what I want. Stop sharing. There we go. Year is already crazy, and it's only the second month. We love it. We love it. We love it. PR in the house. We're taking over. We love it. Xi openly stated last night, I read, that the yuan is now open as a reserve currency, but no one's going to take it. It's not. It's a closed market system. It'll be fine for them. It'll be fine for them to manage they already have bimetallism, right? So they're aligning with the U.S. insofar as they're getting out of the extricative banking system, financial system, Federal Reserve system. They're on their own with their energy, and they'll be able to sell their energy and their products that come from the energy. But they've already been on a bimetallic system. They've already had an internal currency for their own consumption and an external currency for their trade balances. So the renminbi, yuan is going to turn into something like gold and their domestic currency, much like what America's doing. They're going to, in America, turn the US dollar into food stamps. And the real economy is going to go to Bitcoin. And so you're going to have the vestiges of the political money and the political system working in this fiat tapering a Ponzi into the Bitcoin system. And so you will have it for maybe a whole generation, a two-tiered system, one where the political system that we all know still exists, but with actual boundaries and actual limits to its depravity, versus now where you got all these obese people telling you how to be healthy, like in COVID. Remember the health minister of Belgium, we don't fat shame here, but that was one of the biggest tubs of shit I've ever seen in my life. Definitely not a RFK type of person. And you had many instances of this, right? You had many instances around the world. And you can see it in economics, right? All these economists who use how many thousands of economists again are employed at the Federal Reserve. So you've got all of these economists in universities who don't make any money telling people how to be rich. It's why I would never hire in Bitcoin. I've hired a lot of people in this industry. I will never hire an Ivy League grad of a certain age in this industry. It's never going to happen because it's always the same thing. What were you doing? Why would you go to class when they can't teach you anything and you can learn everything practically with hands-on experience in Bitcoin? Why aren't you like Dylan LeClaire? I've known Dylan LeClaire for many years. Dylan LeClaire didn't go to college to become a Bitcoin trader. He didn't go to college to become an analyst. He just did it. You don't need any of that stuff. I know because there was none of those courses when I started. I'm one of the original Bitcoin analysts. I'm one of the original people to actually create research and publish it and sell it and share it on Bitcoin. And that job simply didn't exist before. So that's how I could do it as someone with no history of being a Wall Street analyst. That's how I was able to get my Wall Street paper, the things I was writing on people's desks in Wall Street. Now, CoinDesk was a big help, and having the owner of CoinDesk being a Wall Street guy who helped with distribution into those family offices, hedge funds, whatever else I was doing, banks, everything. But when I first moved to New York, it was as one of the world's first Bitcoin analysts. There was Pierre Rochard, Tur de Meester, who else? Not many. There were not many. The one who worked at ARC, he was great. He's still around. Chris Bernisky. Not a lot. Willie Woo. I mean, it was a handful of people. Spencer Bogart was one that probably was too successful in that era to ever do more analyst work. But there was only a handful of people doing it, and no one really had to go through the old system to get there. We all had to teach each other what was up because there was no reference. We had to create our own models. We had to create our own references. We had to create our own benchmarks. We had to create our own ways of communicating and measuring and persuading people. And so it was something I did in the very early days of Bitcoin. And to this day, if someone said, and the education in college hasn't gotten any better, it's maybe worse than what it was back then. And you got Gary Gensler now at MIT. Like, why would I hire anyone from MIT to be a Bitcoin analyst? Like, just stop. No way. Harvard? What kind of a Bitcoiner is investing money in Harvard? What? Don't do it. Buy coins. You got full coins that you can get instead of tuition. So it's absolutely insane that. And he had think about it, 4 years. And what would 4 years of Harvard be? It's got to be at least 2 full Bitcoins, 3 Bitcoins maybe. And so 3 Bitcoin, you could be standing there with 3 Bitcoins and 4 years worth of published analysis that no one is stopping you from writing. And you're going to come to me and say your degree at Harvard is worth the same as someone who's got the freedom of having 3 Bitcoin and 4 years worth of published analyst work already because you don't need to ask permission. The choice is very simple. There's no choice at all. So, and people do this. People do it. You go on Medium, go on any of these systems, you see people do it all the time. All right, folks. Willy Woo scares me like a scarecrow. Yeah, he's a very smart guy. Darn good episode. Hard to decipher who is legit these days. I find Simon Dixon and Tom Luongo both insightful. Luongo ripped Simon on Simply Bitcoin a few weeks ago and is convinced he works for the City of London. I stay away from Simon Dixon as well. I'm a Tom Luongo guy myself. My problem, I don't know anything about Simon Dixon, really. I haven't even really met him over the years. He's one of those other ones I just don't have much to do with. There was a whole, New York Bitcoiners were just so caught up on our own New York thing for years. We didn't think about what was going on in London or care. What I don't like about Simon is there's no, it literally is a childish way of seeing it, but I'm so programmed on happy endings, and so I think most people are. It's like the Whitney Webb, like who's the good guy in the story? So it just could be a personal flaw of his. Maybe he doesn't see, right, that there's the Norm Macdonald quote that I said to you the other day remember when the first instance of the Minnesota thing happened, and I gave the Scott Adams 2 movies, 1 screen frame. And this is before Scott even passed. It was the day before he passed. And I said, look, it's from a Norm Macdonald quote, which is people think it's good versus evil. That's not it. The nihilist thinks that it is evil versus evil. And that's where I put Simon, just normal nihilism. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. I don't know. And then Norm Macdonald says, of course, it's good versus good, which is where I'm at. Everyone thinks they're on the moral high ground. And what you need to do to win the good versus good battle is reprogram subconscious, incentivize people, and recalibrate the machine so that enough people are aligned on what is, good according to me. So, which I think, of course, is Bitcoin. All right, guys, you're going to have the Borja Bitcoin market report. Let me make sure I know what's going on exactly for all of you guys. I believe you are going to have the state of Bitcoin markets. I'm not sure who the guest is today. Sander Anderson, I think, is coming on. Oh, Alexandre Lezette, I think, is coming on at 1. At noon Eastern time. So should have a couple of good guests there. So go check out the broadcast on Roxham TV. I think they're going to have some great guests. I think you're going to see from Luca and Borja today. So everyone, go check that out. I'm about to hit the end stream here. You're going to see the logo and then the thanks for watching, and go for it. I'm going now. Take it easy.